come in, and it is the chance now to hear back from everybody here and have some good debate. So does anybody want to come? We've got seats down the front. More involved. Come back to the front. I'm sure there'll be some points and it would be nice. It's going to hover really. Stay there, then. I wonder if we start by points that you feel sort of inspired by or I feel challenged by that have come from the film. Yeah, so just say who you are and so we get an idea.
My name's Argyros Alexander and I'm from London.
Are you in a group or a union or?
No, I'm just an active member of the Green Party.
Okay.
Now, watching the film and listening to what everyone here has said has been very good. But there are gaps, and I would like you people to fill those gaps in. But first of all, and very, very importantly, let's deal with the question of the cuts. Now then, this government is imposing on the people all these savage cuts just so that they can pay off all the people that have lent money to them and so on and so forth. But just to get a perspective on that, in 1945, this government was virtually wiped out. It was broke. It was lent an enormous sum of money by the United States. That was paid off 5 years ago. That's how long it took, 60 years. So let's get some form of perspective, number one. Number two, I think it's a great idea, 1 million jobs for dealing with the environment and so on and so forth. But I would like to know from you, how? What will these jobs be? What will they encompass? What will they manufacture? That's what I would like to hear from you. And thank you.
Thank you. Are other people interested? Shall we take a few more? And more points and more questions? You want to say who you are?
Oh, sorry, Bev Cross from Sheffield Bottom Green Party. Am I right in thinking that there's one way of going about this, and that's the big stick that Australia's taken by taxation, and obviously the driver industry, they're feeling that the tax will probably kill their industry. Is that why they were so angry about it? Yeah. Their employers would go bust. That's what you might call the stick. Then there's a carrot of subsidy, isn't there? So instead of taxing, you actually offer an incentive to do something rather than a disincentive with taxation. Where do we stand on this? Are we definitely in favour of subsidy rather than taxation, or a mix of both?
Who's we? Who are you talking
Well,
to?
the Green Party climate change activists, the campaign on the green jobs and
We're linking it to the idea of creating a million climate jobs.
yes, I mean,
How is
obviously there's
that
a
going?
cost to this of 20 billion, as you say. Now,
the mechanisms.
yeah, but not by taxation, but somehow through subsidy, which will then somehow pay that 20 million.
Okay, cool.
Just wondering how that's going to work.
How's the money going to?
Yeah.
And then, how do you get a car? How do you get to be enabled? That's a good one, isn't it? Do we have another question?
My name's Green Party last elections in one range. I'm interested in global revolution in terms of making this level playing field as opposed to particular countries dictating to one another. And we've seen this sort of like the past sort of year with Egypt, Greece, my understanding of the cuts and whether this is actually a false pretense. And what I mean by that is the banks, money is debt, and it's never, you know, my understanding is that while money is debt, people are only just about understanding the concept of how banks magic up large sums of money in the first place, particularly, you know, the USA reserves, and how people understand that, because I think that's the basis of where we are at in terms of job cuts. For me, in relation to jobs, I've always created and been self-employed, so I don't have any concept of what it's like to work 9 to 5. I've worked like probably 8 till 10 o'clock every day of my life. So how does that balance out? Where do people find their own creative outlets for creating their own jobs? So there's quite a
broad
few
sweep
things
there
there,
about
yeah.
incorporating
So
understanding
it's
that
banking.
and money.
It's cut how people feel from the perspective of feeling a bit more freer in terms of saying what they need to say on a global scale. That includes, you know, you mentioned Dakar, Senegal, you know, African continent, and also the UK. Sorry, it's a bit long with
a big one. So we've got three. One is about what's the nature of the jobs, and what are the mechanisms, and then a broad one of how should we get over the idea of money in banks and the northern countries dictating to other countries, and how to enable creativity to flourish.
Yeah, I'll start with the question about what sort of jobs. I mean, this is the ideal moment for me to say that it's a very long pamphlet, and I'll be saying them at the end. And they are in great detail. It does go through the breakdown of where the jobs should be and what they should be doing and so on. And it's £2.50, and you can find it at the end. But less flippantly, perhaps, I think that if you imagine you have 1 million jobs, and you recognise, you know roughly which sectors of the economy create the most carbon dioxide, which sectors of the economy need the most investment. That gives you a little bit of an inkling into where the changes will come from. The key number of jobs we want to create is over the space of a decade. 425,000 in renewable energy. Those 425,000 people who manufacture wind turbines, manufacture tidal turbines, who are involved in the research and development of further parts of those equipment, the people who erect them, and the people who maintain them. You know, there are a further, I'm not just glancing at the list, a further 175,000 jobs in renovation of buildings. That's a planned scheme over a period of 10 years to insulate every single building that it's possible to do with a programme starting with the worst and ending with the best. It would be madness for me to go into the great detail of this, but I do think that there are some really good ideas, and I'm sure that everyone would have their own ideas. And I also think it would be different in Sheffield from Acton-on-Sea or in East London or Manchester, where I come from. The way that you might want to improve your buildings or in particular local transport infrastructure will depend very much on what's happening locally. In terms of the money question, you see, I'm not going to try and attempt to answer it. I'm not a member of the Green Party, so I'm not going to try and tell you which position should be and where you get the funding for this. But I do think that, really, if you look about the great moments of change in economic history that have happened in this country and elsewhere, they have very rarely come from internal taxation. They have come from governments imposing money from outside, either money they have borrowed or money that they have taken from other sources. Now, you're right to say that we're talking about an investment of 20 billion a year. It's actually 50 billion with 30-odd billion worth of savings. Because we all know that once you pour money into economies, it tends to stimulate economies and so on. But once you start talking about raising 20 billion, it sounds a lot to us on basis, but in terms of the amounts of money that governments have available for things like military expenditure, I don't need to tell you, it's a drop in the ocean. And very finally, your longer question. You see, I think it's very difficult to understand what's happening around the cuts unless you understand it in terms of an ideological warfare on the poor. This is about the government attempting to reshape the economy in the interests of making money out of public services, and I think that's why we have to resist the cuts, not simply because we like our NHS or we like council services, but because actually it is about them trying to dismantle that and make ordinary the poorest people pay. And I think that feeds into jobs and so on, because I think the way people go to work and why people work and the reasons that they do their jobs isn't simply about them paying their salaries, it's because they want to help people and their communities. I was very struck when I met and worked with the Vestas workers over their occupations, how many of them had deliberately chosen to go and work at Vestas because they cared about the planet. And that's why when Vestas closed down, so many of them were so angry, not because they were just losing their jobs and the local economy was being decimated, because actually they had visions of the future. They put their belief in this company trying to make the world a better place, and the rug had been pulled out from underneath them. So I think if we can build a political movement around these questions, actually we can inspire more people to be part of them and inspire a different way of organising and looking at the world.
Yeah. To reiterate a lot of what Martin said, but just also to link it into some things that have been said at conference here already. I don't know if anybody was at the inequality meeting last night, and Richard Wilkinson showed some graphs which showed about how inequality had reduced sort of from the period of the Second World War and stayed fairly low until 1980, and then there'd been a huge increase in inequality, which Danny Dorling then also gave some other figures that kind of explained that huge growth in inequality. So yes, I think you're right. The whole cuts agenda and the whole, there isn't enough money now, and the poor people have got to have money taken away from them, is actually, it is a deliberate agenda. And if you've watched the film Inside Job, you'll have seen another take on that, about the way that this has been, is being orchestrated in a way. So yes, and I think something that John McInally said in that meeting last night was even basic Keynesianism is looked on as extremism. And I mean, you could look at the climate jobs agenda as being, in a way, basic Keynesianism. It is about creating jobs in the things you need and paying people rather than paying them not to work. It's about investing in jobs. And the kind of areas that we've summarised it as in Sheffield is making buildings energy efficient, expanding and integrating low-fare public transport, creating research and manufacturing for energy generation from renewable sources, enabling the switch to local ecological food production, and offering free programmes for training and green skills. And that's a pretty good list that I think we can sign up to. But it is definitely part of quite a big political question that I think has come out for me several times already in this conference, right from Caroline's initial speech about the way that things are being used to target the poorest. And this is something that will actually benefit the poorest people in society.
Thank you. The people are really keen to tell us those. I've seen. Can I? Yeah. The man in the.
John Payne. I'm from Dudley Green Parks in Dudley, West Midlands. It surfaced in a workshop yesterday, and I'm trying to make a point about economics education. I'm a former teacher of economics.
Everybody here at the back.
Yeah. And sorry, it's quite a big problem because, I mean, if you create 1 million jobs, there are 2.5 million people unemployed at the moment. If you create 1 million jobs, it's a significant restructuring of the economy. And to restructure the economy is not a short-term thing, it's quite a long-term thing. You can't do it, I wouldn't say you can make major structural changes to an economy in the short term. It's a long-term affair. For example, just to give you an example, I mean, in 1970, manufacturing accounted for 1/3 of the UK economy. Banking and finance finance and property accounted for, I think, about 12%, 1970. You go through to 2006 as a figure I got, the manufacturing has shrunk to about 12 or 13% of the economy. Banking and finance have doubled to about 24% of the economy. So over a period of about 40 years, you've had that structural change. I'm just saying it's quite a long-term thing. There are issues about how it would be achieved. I mean, for the last, since 1979, Margaret Thatcher came to power, the way of organising things has been down to, as everybody knows, to privatisation, deregulation. The market reorganises the economy, and the market in this particular case has reorganised the economy in favour of banking and finance. It's that sector which under free market arrangements has thrived. Well, it's thrived and then bust. So one of the problems that we have if we're reorganising the economy is to meet, say, the free marketeers argument, for one thing, because how do you organise? I would think that you have to move to more planning to actually, and planning, of course, has been out of the window since 1979 in favour of the market. So the people who will attack you will attack you. One of the things will be on the free market, and the market should be left free to determine these things. So there's a case there.
Just to say, if you notice in the film, they were talking about having a national climate service. So that's, a very different kind of organisation, isn't it? Currently we're dealing with more and more privatisation. And in the film it's about a national climate service. So it really is head on to the current economic system.
Can I just make one point about debt?
Yeah. Can we just have that? Can we move on and have other contributions? Is that okay? I know that there are some women who are indicating which would be good. Do you want to say who you introduce yourself?